We are on the line today with Nabiha and E.M. How are you both doing today?
Hello, hello. Wonderful. It's sunny outside.
It is not sunny here because I'm in the UK, but I am also wonderful despite no sun.
That's great. It's also sunny over here in Boulder, Colorado. So kind of odd person out in the UK.
Womp
But
womp.
yeah.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Happens all the time.
But maybe we can bring some sun into the chat by talking about inspiration. Nabiha, let's start with you. What's something inspirational going on in your life or in the world right now?
Ooh, not headlines. No, it's actually the switch of one conversation to another. I feel like my experience in tech in the past had been a lot of like, hey, did you read this? The question I'm getting more and more now is, what are we doing about this? And that's everything from reading about people falling in love with chatbots to data centers going up in neighborhoods in ways that people feel have insufficient consultation. The question is less around the outrage and reaction and more the action and response in a really proactive way. And that being proactive is my love language, and I find that really inspirational right now.
E.M., what about you?
I feel like this is corny to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is that genuinely the Common Voice community is very inspiring to me. So I think that there is a tendency to experience in life so much transactionalism, and every time I go onto the Common Voice Discord or speak to a community member, I feel like I get to escape that for a minute because they're genuinely motivated by building something better together. And there's, oh, I know that. Oh, I did my PhD on that. Oh, I'm in a project about that. We can just jump on a call. Let's just fix it together. And I wish that every single moment of my day was interactions like that. So genuinely, the people we get to work with.
No.
Quick technical pause. When we're not speaking, can we just mute? It just makes it a lot easier to edit for me. But I forgot to say that in advance. E.M., that is a great tee up for our topic today, which is to talk about Common Voice. Nabiha, I first heard you talk about Common Voice, and like we were talking about before the show, I was like, we need to do that. Like, we need to feature that because it is amazing. It's an amazing project, which brings me to my first question. What is that project? And Nabiha, do you want to start?
I want the person who looks after it every single day to explain in her own voice. You'll see the theme. We live our values over here.
Great, E.M., go for it.
It sounds like I teed it up deliberately, which I did not. There was no pre-planning there. So I will talk about Common Voice, but Nabiha, you definitely get to weigh in because Common Voice is ultimately a project that lives within Mozilla Foundation, so she'll get that. So Common Voice is a community project to help build tech that speaks your language. And it is a global crowdsourcing initiative where communities all over the world have come together and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if technology actually supported my language and actually centered my heritage and my culture? And wouldn't it be great if that data was available to be used for the things that I actually care about? So it started in 2017, and it was really a response to this trend that technology had to be in English, first and foremost, maybe exclusively, and this other trend that only large technology companies got to decide what kinds of tech could be built. And people came together and said, well, actually, why should it be that way? Why can't there be data sets in Bukasadong and Urdu? Why can't these data sets exist? And why can't I interact in technologies with the languages that I want to? And Common Voice started there, and it has now been going for several years, and we have 300 language communities around the world who are contributing into the data sets. We have, I think it's about 750,000 contributors in every inhabited continent who are just giving up their time to sometimes record clips, sometimes contribute sentences, sometimes listen to other people's clips, sometimes write code. But it is an all hands on deck like contribution megathon that is happening even right now.
Can I jump in about why I love Common Voice so much? So fundamentally, Mozilla Foundation is about building a better technology future because we think that the course that we happen to be on right now, which often incentivizes centralization of power and a few having power at the expense of many, is probably not what better looks like. That's probably not what good is, right? So, what's so quietly radical to me about Common Voice is the following. If you speak another language, and I'm sure people listening do, you know that there's concepts available to you in one language that might not be available in English, right? Like I think about this with Urdu all the time. There's literally just ways you think about very human interactions in your life or concepts that are available to you that just like, it's like explaining a joke. Like it just wouldn't be possible in English. To actually unleash the capability of people to innovate in different languages is widening the aperture of what innovation is possible in a way that allows for alternatives that you would not be able to imagine were you situated solely in one language. And so to me, it is like the most beautiful example of what it means to care about building tech alternatives by actually saying, yep, not this is possible because of your contributions, and what it creates is additional alternative contributions that we couldn't even imagine, even if we tried building only in one space. And so the first time I came across the project, and then the more I learned from EM and others in the community, it's like exemplar of everything that we're trying to do. So I love it.
So I want to get back into especially the cultural component and the accent and like what gets captured versus not captured by language in the tech world. But I want to draw the line through as well, where you're collecting data and then the data is put into a data set and then it goes somewhere. Could you kind of draw the line in data set creation to eventual data set use and who would be using these data sets?
Yeah, completely. Well, I think the first thing to say, because it really undergirds everything, is that the communities design the data sets. And I think it's one of the things that is different and special. It's not just the case that they contribute audio clips. It's not just the case that they donate sentences. What they do is decide what kind of data they want to exist. What domains do they care about? What is going to solve problems for their community? What kinds of people do they need to make sure they reach? No one should set those priorities except the communities themselves. And so that is the through line for all of this, is they decide. They are the designers, the co-designers, rather than just being implementers. So it starts off with someone comes to us and says, hi, I have a language I would like you to add to Common Voice. And sometimes that process, they know a ton about their language and they're ready to go and they're just like, here's my ISO code and my BCP47 code, all of these kind of linguistic standards. And sometimes they say, I am an enthusiastic speaker and I do not have that information available, please help me. And sometimes that's a more handheld process. Then once they have requested the language on the platform, they translate the platform. They work with communities of volunteers to localize the whole platform so that they get to have it in their language so that they can meaningfully consent to taking part in this data creation process. Then they contribute sentences, which is honestly, it's a huge bottleneck for lots of languages because the availability of public domain text that in English we take for granted. You know, we have Wikipedia, there's lots of things that exist in the public domain. We've had books where the copyright has fallen out because they're 100 years old. We have those things for so many languages that doesn't exist. And so sometimes curating even 100 sentences in that language can be a real labor of love. And then once they have the sentences and the platform is localized, we put it up and then people can come and record little clips of themselves reading out sentences, or they can record themselves responding to a little prompt like, how do you make your favorite meal? Something that's fairly culturally universal, like food. Everybody loves food. They record that, and then if it's that, they transcribe it. Then what we do on our side is we essentially bundle this into a data set. We make sure that there's nice metadata schema. We make sure that there is a quality assurance process that it's gone through, and then we release it under a CC0 license, which means that anyone can come along and make use of the data set for whatever they're working on. It can be public interest use cases, personal projects. We do not release our list of downloaders, but I can say that it includes some of the largest technology companies in the world and little individual master's students who are working on a pet project. It is the full range, which is part of what's very exciting about it.
So let's get back to culture and language for a second. EM, why language? There's lots of things the Mozilla Foundation could be focusing in on in terms of cultural preservation, and I'm sure there are a lot of projects that you all are working on in terms of that in technology, but this Common Voice is specifically focused around language, and I find that really powerful. And EM, I was wondering, how did that come to be, and maybe what problem in the world are you trying to solve?
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll just say kind of one word about why I care about it personally as well, because I also fell hard and early in love with Common Voice when I heard about it. And my husband's from the island of Borneo, which is a very multilingual society, and we were new parents trying to raise our children multilingual, and we came in with, technology will be our friend, and there'll be apps, and there'll be things, and there'll be pronunciation guides, and nope, there's nothing, it's rubbish. We were like, wouldn't it be great if there was more of that? And then I think within 2 weeks, I saw this job at Common Voice come up, and I was like, that one, I must go and apply for that one immediately. So that's the personal side, which I think is everyone in the community has a story like that. It could be that they care about passing language on between generations, because right now, newsflash, we're losing languages. We are hemorrhaging culture in the world and moving towards being this homogenous group of people who only speak one way and care about one set of things, and that is the opposite of a vibrant and beautiful future. So everyone in the community has a version of that story. And then I think on the technology side of things, if the personal is not enough, then I think on the technology side of things, what I love about language is that it is a fundamental unit of so many different kinds of technology, whether you care about healthcare and patient-doctor communication, whether your thing is justice and you care about making sure that court proceedings are transcribed accurately, whether you care about making sure that, consumer technology can not, proliferate harms. Language is going to be a core component of that. It's the ingredient. It's like flour. Like, you kind of need flour to bake all kinds of different things. Like, you need flour. This is not a good analogy. Language is like that. And so that's one of the things that I was very drawn to, that it could be different things for so many different use cases and contexts.
Nabiha, what would you like to add?
That fundamental unit piece really resonates with me. I think of the many things I love about Common Voice, one is the following, that it sort of follows this cycle of, I think we have to imagine what a good future looks like. We then have to know what the building blocks of that happen to be, to give them to others to make and then mobilize what that tech future should look like. It just should not come down from on high. And so the work for Mozilla is like, what are those fundamental building blocks that we can be creating that are open to many who are willing to create those alternatives? And all of that is rooted in a really deep humility of like, I don't know what's best. And I shouldn't have to decide what's best for you. I'm not gonna know. I'm not, and once you accept that humility, the focus is actually really clear about the building blocks that you need to make. And language, going back to EM's fundamental unit point, like, that's it. You have to have that. Otherwise, if you could start downstream, sure, but why not go all the way upstream to that fundamental unit of how people build and interact and create with one another? Because the community piece is so important.
I'm thinking about how LLMs are the new hotness, as it were, and everyone is talking about. See, we were talking about using Gen Z-ish language, which I am not of that. Is that, I don't know how many different generations I've now dated myself. But thinking about LLMs and LLM use, I am curious for the use of this data set or these data sets, whether you have any concerns about how the data sets might be used downstream, or how you think about ethics in this space, because I think it's amazing. And I also wonder, we know how data sets can be used without the original intention. And so I am wondering, EM, if you want to start how you're thinking about use and morality, maybe in terms of LLMs or beyond.
Yeah, it's a great, hard question. And I Look, I'll speak to a few things, but this has to be an ongoing conversation. I mean, even since I joined the project in, however many years ago it was, 4+ years, the conversation has shifted already. What was possible with 5 hours of audio data is radically different to what is possible now with 5 hours of audio data. So whatever we say about this, it has to move with the technology and with the dialogue. So I would say, historically, the position has been that actually you have to trust people and you cannot optimize for the few people who might do something terrible. If you're trying to enable everyone, you have to optimize for, actually, we want to make it really easy for you to come and pick this up and use it, which is one of the reasons that Common Voice has been licensed, not just any old Creative Commons, but CC0, which means Creative Commons 0, dedicated to the public domain. You can use this without kind of meaningful constraints of any kind. And that was meant to be, as Nabiha said, like a building block for creativity and an enabler. What I would say is that communities often, how to say it, like they self-decide, they self-determine what they think is an appropriate use of their data. And so when people are concerned, they might come to us. And I'll give a real example, because I really believe that we have to build this thing in the open. Someone decided to create a gender classifier using the Common Voice dataset, which means that essentially you could run it over other clips and you could determine with some degree of accuracy, put that in quotation marks, whether or not this was likely to be a clip from a male or female speaker, because at the time, with the dataset they were training on, we only had those two as gender markers. We've since changed that, and we now have a much more inclusive range of options. Now, some people in the community thought that that was fine. They were like, actually, there are some really good reasons why you might want to have something like that. For example, maybe you have a large data set that is too large to manually tag. You don't have self-description, and you're trying to use it in a medical context where actually it's quite important to know some of those pieces of information about the data set for medical reasons. So there's that use case which can be used for good, if you like, or for a really meaningful use case that solves a problem. And there are also some really ugly ways that you might want to apply a classifier like that. So I think deciding on what ethical uses of the dataset looks like is very hard to do from on high. I think it has to be evaluated in community and in dialogue, and understanding that these things are nuanced and so many things can be used in multiple directions. Some might trouble us, some might not trouble us. And the community is not homogenous on these issues. For some people, even some of those use cases that might fall into the troubling category for one person weren't troubling for another. So I think hard, fast, and simple rules are difficult to come by in this space, to be honest.
Nabiha, anything to add there?
I think it's exactly what EM ended on. People want easy, simple answers, especially in a time of rapid change and potentially growing risk. And the reality is that you can get those answers, but they won't hold, right? So even if something were to be simple and straightforward for today, it won't be for tomorrow. And if we open ourselves up again to that principle of humility of like, I actually don't know how this is going to shake out. If I accept that, then it's like, well, how am I making sure, what are my responsibilities to make sure communities are equipped to decide meaningfully themselves, right? So do they have access to any information or guidance or education? Do they know where to go? And critically, how to talk to one another in order to have that level of self-determination. And that opens up some of the other work that we do at Mozilla Foundation of like, we do have education programs throughout the world. We think about how to work and build in the open and how to be transparent, how to build community so people can actually be exchanging their experiences across context, because you need that in order for people to have like meaningful, dynamic choice. Because you may decide something today and then be like, actually, I didn't realize what was possible 2 years from now. And are we equipped to say, hey, actually, this isn't working, or it's not working in the way that we thought, and now we need to strike a different balance. And so I think the humility leads to that self-determination, which leads to a whole lot of work that is not hard, straightforward, and fast, but is, I think, the only ethical way for us to proceed right now.
Yeah, let's talk about that work for a second, because that's one of the things I'm really curious about. I'm hearing what you all are saying in that, well, at least in my experience in the AI ethics space, we've moved from some of these top-down checklists of like, this is what bias, this is what ethics looks like. Now, a lot of people are talking more about participation, participatory design, going more global, getting different people's voices in the conversation. In my experience as a researcher, that's a lot harder than making a checklist in a lot of ways. And the scale that you all are doing participation is one of the most powerful parts of the project for me, of Common Voice for me. But I am wondering, how do you do that, either at the Mozilla Foundation level or at the Common Voice level? And actually, let's start at the Mozilla Foundation level and go down into Common Voice. Nabiha, can you talk about how you position that?
Yeah, of course. So I will give a small example and then zoom out. So separate and apart from Common Voice, when I came into the foundation just over a year ago, one of the live food fights in AI was about the use of creative works and how creative works, if in one place, people are like, oh, well, it's online, it's fair use. I'm like, okay. And then other people who have done a lot of creative labor are like, right, where's our compensation for this? What's happening? And so this is a flashpoint that like very quickly become quite tribal, and was facilitated along that journey by a whole lot of litigation. And we thought, okay, in these moments where positions are calcifying, right? And people are maybe making decisions about what's possible based on, frankly, tribal affiliations. Like, I am creative, ergo I'm here. I'm a tech person, so I believe this. How could we create space to subvert some of that sort of tribal binary thinking and actually have space to discuss and equip? And so one of our colleagues, Syed started this really fascinating creative assemblies process rooted in Hollywood. Like, let's just go to ground zero where a certain type of creative happens to be and say, okay, we're going to hold these day-long convenings with a facilitator to talk about what are elements of the AI future that give us pause, that we're curious about, that we can really explore slowly with one another. And having had the joy of being at one, this is like the opposite of being in the comment section of a TikTok, right? Like, it's just totally different. It is like meaningful, robust, like nuanced. Actually, some TikTok comments are like that. I won't paint all of them as a person who spends too much time on TikTok. But it was really like people having space to say like, I don't know about this. Here's what I think. And watching people help each other along in the journey actually resulted in a lot of diversity of thought, very nuanced, and a lot of trust building and power building, which we often ignore as a fundamental dynamic in self-determination in this space. Like, you got to know who you're trusting, for what reason, in what context, how, in order to build that kind of community to make decisions. And what will be coming out of it is actually a set of informed, like creative informed design principles where, you'll sneak peek, you'll hear about it later this year, of people saying, well, actually, like, there's a way to use technology that does facilitate, help, encourage our community understanding of how to use AI in this time. And actually, by the way, here are areas where we're like, no, thanks, like, we don't want it. And how can we think about that? And to me, that's like a microcosm of a lot of principles that are core to how Mozilla Foundation moves in the world, which is think with nuance, go to where the hard questions happen to be, create spaces and facilitate for people to speak to one another, make sure that the educational resources that people might need are adjacent and available, and that's why we invest so much in global education programs. And then, like, let's get a thing out of it, right? Like, the reason that you should distill it into design principles is precisely so we're not saying, here's the answer. It's saying, if you're going to build, keep this in mind, because this is what people want. And it's going back to that building block mentality. And so you'll see that across all of our programs of work, whether it is our advocacy experiments that are now also thinking about, well, how are we getting the right information at the right time to the right people to make decisions for themselves, to our education work, to our creative engagements, and also to our festival, which is every year, and it's sort of a personal instantiation of like, all right, let's get people together in a room and see what communities can decide, and also have a good time, because if it's not fun, it's not going to work. So we should make sure that we do that too. And you'll also see it in an incubator that we'll be launching later this year of other projects that we really think have an extraordinary amount of potential, but just need that space to develop the community part of what we're doing, because that's how we get what we really want. I promised you I wasn't going to be long-winded, but instead I delivered to you a sermon of why I love everything Mozilla does and why. The end. EM.
That's my genre. The sermon's my genre, so I accept it. I feel it. EM, what would
you talk about Nabiha being sort of like Mozilla pastor, which is like, I'm doing a sermon on Mozilla.
I volunteer. I am ready whenever you want me.
I'm obsessed. We need to get you a pulpit. I'm seeing maybe like a very colorful, new branded pulpit. It's not the point. Edit it out. Okay, so everything Nabiha said, and I will, to be unfun for 1 minute, just underline how enormously hard it is to do it. It's so hard, and let me give you a few little like tidbits that should indicate how hard it is and how much work we put into it. For the whole time until very recently that I have been here, we have had as many people on community as on engineering for a tech platform. And we think that that is the minimum that it takes to do this well. There are human people who within the community are constantly in at least 3 different fora, helping to get people onboarded, helping to listen to people, having conversations which are, you think it's hard to understand each other in one language. Try having it across 300 different languages. The challenges are just myriad. It's so difficult. And I think the only answer is to accept that all the solutions that you put in place are difficult to scale, extremely messy, hectic, involve people who actually not just say, but really feel that feedback is a gift, and then get those people to work in those spaces. There are so few of us who actually really live out that feedback is a gift and who can respond to somebody who is irate and upset and don't like the way that a thing is being done, and who can enter with just grace and empathy of, I'm listening, like, tell me, I need to know. And when you find those people, immediately hire them and get them to come and work in the community team, because it's what you need. Like, people really need to feel that you actually are listening, even if you can't solve their problem. The first problem is that they're not feeling heard. So I think that's thing one. And we have multiple different systems because we couldn't find a community platform that would work for every geography. So we have 3 different ones running in parallel. Doing this work involved breaking so many product maxims actually, and so many kind of classic product rules. It's like, no, this is not 80/20, this is 20/80. We have so many platforms, but actually it's what it can take sometimes to build a community that is really vibrant and listens to each other. So I think that's my kind of overarching thing on Common Voice. And maybe the only other thing I'll say, as we're being long-winded, and we'll just take it in turns being long-winded, is that I think that making space for people to have like small group conversations has also been a source of some of the richest insight we've gathered. So let me give you a real example. Is we wanted to know whether our community still felt the same about CC0 after 2 years of the kind of AI situation that we have been in. And, TLDR, they don't, or at least a lot of them don't. And that conversation, trying to do it in surveys and forums, it wasn't working. There was kind of no replacement for getting people into a design space together. We had like 7 people in a room at a time to go through these exercises that helped them think through it. And we gave them scenarios and we got them to rate how they felt about it, and then share with the group, and then argue with the group about their various ratings. And that provided such a rich source of information for us about how these things might be shifting.
Could either of you share maybe a specific story or 2 of people out in the community, really anywhere in the world, who are using this technology and maybe have found it particularly empowering or have named the amount of fun they might have had? See, Nabiha, you might be pointing over at EM. EM, what stories would you like to share?
I do. I am going to flag that my young children have just gotten home and there may be a lot of background noise. So if that's happening, you can mute me. It's fine. I won't be offended. I mean, there's a whole community happening like right behind that door. Seriously.
This is participatory design right here.
There's participation. I mean, I think my partner is being just overwhelmed by participation right now. So many. Give you an anecdote. When I first joined, it took me a full month to figure out who worked at Mozilla because the community members, some of them are just indistinguishable from the people who work at Mozilla, the people who were jumping in and helping each other. It was really difficult to tell. I have a few. I don't want to name names because I haven't pre-gathered consent for some of these people, but I can tell you one of the first people I spoke to was a computational linguistics professor who was married to someone who was a Narawat speaker, and basically they wanted to build out language learning software that would help their children learn the language, and they couldn't find anything. Another example is there were a group who banded together to try and make sure that it was a sort of language association that was officially mandated to try and save this language that had about a dozen speakers at the time. And so they all got together with their phones to record speakers who were going to be the last few speakers of this language in order to make sure that there was this ongoing testament to what it had sounded like and the kinds of concepts embedded within it. I think there are so many. That's just a couple. I think that's on the data contributor side. On the data consumer side, people who maybe themselves are not creating data sets, but who are using it to build out things that they really care about. Yeah, I mean, there are a few that have always really stayed with me. I think one of the ones I quote quite a lot because the mission hit me, like being hit with a brick. It was such a powerful mission to me. It was a company called Mabel AI, which is based in Sweden. And their mission was to try and eradicate misunderstanding as a cause of death, which is a cause of death in patient-doctor interactions, where doctor doesn't speak the language, translator can't be found, and that breakdown in communication leads to death. Their mission is to eradicate that with private, secure, patient-doctor, confidential communication, where the data never even hits the cloud. And I think use cases like that are in part powered by data sets like Common Voice, and they're in our opinion also a dreamy contributor because they then think about contributing back into the data sets as well, and they use Common Voice data to try and make sure that there are really secure multilingual translation systems in the healthcare setting.
That's amazing. This is a total aside. My dissertation was entirely about conversations that clinicians and people at the end of their lives, especially cancer patients, were having with one another, and some of those communication breakdowns just in terms of documentation. And I think something, if there was like a data set for even building out that kind of documentation format in like an electronic health record, that would be so important. That's not that relevant to necessarily where we're going in this conversation.
There are so many sidebars we need to have. I have so many thoughts about that, and I have so many people for you to talk to. Anyway, absolutely. Sidebar.
I did want to get back into the language, and I'm thinking about translation, and since we were talking about sermons, I've actually been thinking a lot about the story of the Tower of Babel and like us having a single language and falling into all these different languages. But your Common Voice is not called Common Language or One Language. It's called Common Voice. And Nabiha, I was wondering how you think about this act of translation and coming together as not just, hey, we should all speak English, right? Like that's obviously not the project, but we need to speak in a common voice around the world.
Ooh, I love this question. So I like to think of this conceptually like the best potluck of all time, which is rather than homogenizing everything into one mismatch or mishmash, because it's easy, that's like eating one meal, like blah, who has time? It's actually everyone bringing the best of what they have, or even like whatever they happen to have or what's interesting, to be like, well, this is what I'm making, this is what I'm thinking. And through that, we can start to find commonality, particularly around one, I think, very core human motivation, which is to like make and to build. People like building things. Like I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they just like making stuff, also sometimes destroying, which is part of the building process. They like making things together, right? And you just see that everything from the human desire to have a picnic or go to the beach and build a bonfire or make a product or build, we like to make things together. We like to be creators, not just consumers. And I think particularly in tech, something has happened in the last few decades where for so many, our interaction with technology is about what we can consume, what we can buy, what we can get, and to subvert that to say like, nope, it's about creating first the data sets together, then creating things together from that hits at that very core unifying. That's what's common between us, but it's manifested in all of these different ways. And now that I've mixed all of my metaphors of buffets and fires and building blocks, you now know what I love about this common endeavor.
Yeah, we can call collectively those things the hotness, I think. Is that still,
Yeah,
still accurate?
Well,
the flower and the hotness is the metaphors we're working with.
You have a title for this episode now.
E.M., what would you add?
I would say that there is a version of this so when I first joined, it was situated within advocacy. So now it sits within product and programs. Now that sounds like boring internal talk, but I actually think it isn't. I actually think it speaks very specifically to the fact that people can be motivated by a lot of different things about a project like this, but one of them is actually advocating for oneself and elevating one's voice. And language, as you say, language is one way to think about it, but another way to think about this is that it's a kind of protest. It's a sort of, I see that you don't see me, and I can tell, and I'm going to make you listen by raising my voice. And I have always loved that piece of common voice. It's not just we're all making data sets together. That's obviously fun. We love data sets, make loads of them. It's also, hey, we're standing up to tell you that we see that you didn't see us and you didn't represent us. And so we just built the thing because we don't need your permission to be heard. So I love that. That to me is why voice is so much more powerful than language.
If I could just plus one that, first of all, she should have gone first. But from the overall Mozilla perspective, the thing that drew me to the entire Mozilla enterprise is that it's rooted in a philosophy I like to call defiant optimism, and both of those matter, which is it's not just optimism for optimism's sake. There's an element of defiance in it, which is like we will actually build something that works for us, whether you like it or not. And we know it probably won't come from you. And that's so core to the overall enterprise of Mozilla, and for the foundation to be carrying that principle forward, and everything that it does is really like the best way to understand how we're moving in the world. And Common Voice is that front and center, which is there's that element of defiance that like we're speaking with one voice to you, but also the optimism, which is like, and we're just going to do it. We're just going to make this for ourselves, and we know that it will be good. So thanks. Have a nice day.
Yeah, in that line, I was talking with Tess Posner over at AI for All, who does a lot of youth advocacy in AI, the other week, and we were talking about just dreaming big. And I think that's my question for you all around dreaming big on Common Voice going into the future, maybe from the Mozilla Foundation side or otherwise. I'm not going to ask you in 100 years, what would this ideally do? But if you would wave a magic wand, maybe within 5 years, 10 years, what is the impact ideally that you want Common Voice to have out in the world? And E.M., let's start with you.
My children are raising their voice so loudly in the background. I really apologize, but also I don't apologize because I want them to be voice raisers. I love this question. I want to see a world in which people can interact with, build technology that works in their language, no matter what it is. And, linguists estimate that there are like 7,000 languages in the world, and most voice assistants support like 20. So we've got a way to go. I hope it doesn't take the full 100 years, but I want to see a world in which you are able to have this healthy relationship with your device that's rooted in the way that you want to talk to it, not how it wants to talk to you. I see it as just like a a flipping of the power dynamic. You should be in the driver's seat, you should be in charge, and if you want to speak the language of your forebears with your device, then that should just be so simple. And if other people are not going to build it for you, then you should be able to build it for yourself. So you go, okay, great, I have the data, I have the tools, I have my device, I've built the thing that I want to interact with. I'm not waiting for someone to build it for me.
+1 to that, and I want people to believe that it was always that way. Like, to me, real success is when you get to a place where people are like, it was always like this. What could have something else been like? And you're like, yes, now we've made it. I actually don't want anyone to associate it with a particular moment in time. I want them to feel that it was inevitable, that would happen. And to think of a time where it wasn't, as when my 5-year-old asks me, Mama, what was it like when you grew up in black and white? I'm like, first of all, rude. Like, there was color when I was a child. Like, what are you talking about? And also for him, it's just that the idea that something like your agency in speaking to your devices in your own language would only be possible in an antiquated, backwards time. That is the level of progress I know that we will get to. Just gonna take a couple minutes to get there, but we'll get there.
Yeah, there's a saying in my research world that successful infrastructure is successful when you don't see it. And it's when it starts breaking down that you see the infrastructure itself. I know we're almost out of time, and so I'm going to couple 2 questions together. One is, what would a book, movie, piece of media that you would recommend to listeners be and why? And 2, are there any last words, either on Common Voice or in general, messages to listeners, sermons to listeners within about 30 seconds?
I will forego my book recommendation so that I can invite everybody to go to Common Voice and contribute. No, I'm serious. In all seriousness, if you think that is important, we sometimes say, this is a no code from your sofa way to get involved with the world. And there are a lot of people who really want and need no code from your sofa ways to build a better tech future. So here we are, we're here, and there's space for you. So go to Common Voice. If you don't see your language, you can just hit the button and request it, and we will take the next steps. So that is my ask, and Nabiha can now recommend 2 books.
I mean, I actually was going to recommend 2 books, which you maybe know, I'm a yes and reader, so I'm always reading 2 to 3 things simultaneously. I often like them to be in conversation with one another, but this one is accidental, but really has been shaping a lot of my mindset over the past couple of months. So at a talk, someone handed me Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, and I was like, okay, great. Is it 1995? Like, why is someone giving me this book? However, I then realized that I actually had not read it. I had only read the Wikipedia articles about it, so it's probably time to read a canonical thing that people reference. So I was like, okay, cool. And at first I was 0% excited, other than obligation and duty of like, I'm a well-read person, I should read this, but like, oh, a story about someone traveling and finding themselves, Eat, Pray, Love, how novel. But then I started reading it. And my yes and was that, that I started reading at the same time, is that I love Ursula K. Le Guin, but I love her essays, and somehow had not read, partially because I knew it was going to break my heart, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which is a very, for those who are listening who have not read it, very heavy story about collective happiness built on the suffering of, well, you should read it, and what it means to walk away, and what it means to see and observe, and like, what does that mean for you? Reading these 2 side by side about what is your personal journey, but how do you think about collective responsibility for what you're doing, is such a fundamental tension of our time, and is a lens through which we should be understanding so much, including AI, which you may feel like is an individual set of choices that you're making predicated on the collective knowledge of so many. And I think using those 2 things to understand the tensions and dynamics there are really deep. And then when you want something joyful, you should go participate in Common Voice. Great, thanks.
Y'all are wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us.